Hello, everybody. My name is Pablo Tovar, and I am a senior music entrepreneurship major here at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. I am currently working on my music capstone project, and I am creating a podcast that is focusing on the three out of 8 dimensions of wellness, which is a 3D wellness for musicians. And my guest speaker today is Dr. Fannin, and she is the director of bands here at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Hi, Dr. Fannin, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am great. I am amazing.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to being here.
Yeah, awesome. So how long have you been a music educator for?
Well, I've been a music educator for 25 years, essentially, with about 4 of those years in graduate school.
Okay.
If we don't count that, that's about 21.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how long have you been here at the university?
This is year 7.
Year 7. Awesome. And how, for anybody who's kind of looking into graduate schools, what is one thing you'd recommend, especially if they're going into like a conducting, master's?
Oh, sure. So I think with going into a conducting master's, I'll kind of speak from my background, which is my bachelor's degree is in music education.
Yeah.
And so what was most important was to go and teach first, because that's when students can go and apply all of the skills they've learned in conducting class and their music education classes. Those things are all so connected. And you can't really replace that professional experience. So 3 to 5 years, I mean, that's just rough. It can be less, sometimes more. Then people, it's a good time for people to look for a graduate program. And if they want to do a graduate program in conducting, a great thing for people to do is go to conducting symposia and workshops in the summer.
Okay.
And they also have some during the school year. We have one at UNO that's a real short one in June. But you can go to, there's a lot of them all over the country. And that gives people a chance to meet a lot of different conducting teachers and see how that connection is, because as we know, that connection with a teacher is really, really important.
Yep, absolutely.
And so it's a chance to connect there and to also kind of know what different places are like. And once COVID is over, those will start being more in person. This summer, I think it's kind of unsure if those will be online or in person. It might be kind of a mix of those.
Yeah, and you've been able to kind of work through everything as well. The Symphonic Wind Ensemble and University Band have been able to meet in person, and I must assume that that's a big thing to kind of schedule and kind of plan out. How have you been kind of mentally preparing yourself for all of this too? Because it's not like we can say, this is my second pandemic, I know what to do.
Right.
Yeah, it's more of a, what are we, what now?
Yeah.
And how do you live through this? How do you keep the music going?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was so great to be able to be back together in August and actually play together.
Yeah.
But the preparations to do that were so big, and they were so different from anything we've ever had to do. Ranging from the safety measures of bell covers and figuring all that out with our Kappa Psi, making those, and masks, and planning music was a whole nother thing, because we had to use flexible instrumentation music to accommodate fewer people in a space. So that our traditional repertoire, most of it wasn't going to work. So it was a planning process. Usually I plan for looking at a lot of music and what music do I really love, what music do I think is really important for students to know, what do I think students will experience in music, and thinking about how that experience is. And with COVID, just planning last summer, it was very different as to what is going to work and how can we schedule pieces that rehearse opposite each other so that we can have 42 students have rehearsal when our spaces accommodate about 18 at once to give everybody a good experience.
And I think the important part of that is that you mentioned how it's music that you like, but as well as music that the students would also appreciate, which I think is a really good thing. And it's not really like a, I like this, you know, and I think it gives you like a very open understanding to everybody, to just kind of have music that you like and music that they would like. So it's very considerate. And uh, is there like a special person who might have influenced you in like all your planning or scheduling, or is that mainly like a you thing that you've kind of grown into, uh, grown yourself into?
The scheduling.
Yeah. So did you learn that from someone, or is that something that you have like raised your skills in?
I think it's something that mainly comes from me. However, I do think that, especially when I did my master's degree at Northwestern, there was just an expectation of things running really well, and part of my job was to do those things. And so there was a place where I really kind of put those skills to work in a place where it was really visible. And the recognition that I had those skills, I think, came at that time. So I kind of have liked the challenge of making making the puzzle pieces fit together. In some ways, well, it's we would like to maybe not have to do it. Clearly, if once COVID's over and we can return to normal, some of that'll be unnecessary. But there is part of that I kind of like, figuring out the puzzle and yeah.
And that's amazing because for the past 4 years that I've worked with you, every time I see the schedule on the board, it just goes as is, and it's always like on time. And so I'm always fascinated because it's just like if we're doing 20 minutes on this piece, it's 20 minutes, and then we just have like these 3 minutes to get things ready, and then next piece. And it's always very like productive, and so I really admired all of that scheduling and planning out. So yeah, it's amazing. And so, is there anybody who kind of like inspired you to pursue music, or was that something that you just felt like doing after high school?
Well, I think I don't know that I considered doing anything else other than music, which seems kind of strange to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that a lot of people would say that. I think I discovered that it was what I was good at when I started band in 5th grade, and I had started piano in 2nd grade. My first piano teacher was my great aunt, and then I had some other teachers too, local teachers, and then started euphonium in 5th grade and really liked it and found that I was good at it. And music was my thing. It was my place, which I bet a lot of us would say that music is kind of where we found our home in school, and it was the same for me. I just loved to play, and was really grateful that my parents were supportive of me being a musician. And I'm a first generation college student. My parents are farmers, so and all of my my relatives are not musicians. My relatives are not artists. They make their living in agribusiness and farming and business and other things. So what I do is really different from my extended family. But I always felt really, really supported. My band directors in school, Jeff Kirkpatrick and Michael Peterson, were really wonderful teachers that I had. And then, there's just so many wonderful teachers. It's hard to name all of them in my college and graduate work.
But it sounds like you had amazing professors and teachers and everybody who just supported you. But yeah, it's really great. And so, do you have any daily routines that you do outside of the School of Music, such as like, do you stay physically active, or do you kind of read more? I know you have 2 wonderful kids and a dog to take care of. So
yes. So there's lots of routines that go on. I think routines are really important to really embrace them. There's a book that I discovered called The Way Artists Work. I think it's by Mason Curry, and it profiles, visual artists, poets, composers. And there are routines they have that don't sound very creative, but they make space for creativity.
Gotcha.
And so, so I tend to be kind of regimented with some of these things, so I don't have to think about them, you know. So I like to run, and I run maybe 3 days a week, and have a time. I do it right away in the morning, and it's the problem with regimenting things is, so if there's a day where we've had this refreeze, right, where it's been hard to run.
Oh yeah.
So if I haven't been able to run in the morning, I don't think, oh, I'll run later this afternoon. I just won't run.
Gotcha.
So there's where sometimes it gets, maybe it's with a more flexible mindset on some of those things. But the flip side of it is it's kind of automated. So most of the time, I just know I'm going to do it.
So are you able to kind of pass by that and say, I didn't get to run today, that's okay? Or do you think it kind of affects you, like mentally, that like throughout the day that like, oh, I didn't get to run and I need to?
Yeah, I would say it's okay because there's enough time where I can go and do it. I will even go and do some things part way, as opposed, I did go run with cleats on the refreeze. Probably didn't get as much out of it as I would have if it was a regular day, but it was a way to still get something out of it.
Yeah.
And you know, there's lots of things, you know, with kids, my schedule is kind of structured with what they need, taking them places. And you know, our dog, which is dogs are great for wellness for sure, but there's a lot of work that goes into to having a dog. Between the hours of 4 and 8 o'clock, he is very needy and barking and needing attention, and then the rest of the time he's pretty mellow. In fact, we went through therapy dog training, so that was really exciting to be able to do something that can help other people. And he was kind of had the disposition. He has the disposition for it, and not all dogs probably are meant to be therapy dogs, but he just happens to kind of have that gift of going into a store and he just sort of stands there and people can come up to him. So
pat him and I think whenever they've brought you in like dogs here at UNO and we're able to pet them, it's just been amazing. And I think it's a really good stress reliever.
Oh yeah.
I know that a lot of little organizations in the School of Music have been wanting to have like a dog day, to where they can bring the dog, like some dogs, and we're able to kind of pet them before juries, continuations, events like those. So have you stayed physically active throughout your undergrad and graduate degrees, or has this been something like afterwards that you like now incorporate?
Yeah.
Or has it been like kind of like for years and years?
Well, I would say that I've always been a walker, in my 20s and things. But exercise really wasn't part of what I thought about or did. When I was registering for a race last year, sometimes there's like a company that organizes it, and you'll put your name in it, and it pulled up a 5K I ran like 15 years ago, but I didn't remember doing it. I had thought that my first 5K was one that I did about 2 years ago, and it's sort of funny that I would have not remembered that. But there's a bus of data that showed me I had done it. So I would say in my 20s, I didn't think about exercise much, and part of that is youth because, I think when you're busy, you have other priorities, and it wasn't one. Now, if I went back and thought about it, it might have been nice to have done some more. I'm sure there would have been a lot of benefits, because the benefits I see now I really think it helps with feeling calm. I remember feeling anxious about things in school, in college, and kind of just not knowing kind of how to handle that, and that was kind of stressful. And if I would have had these tools then, especially in my undergraduate degree, it would have been really, really helpful. Especially at that time, because I think things are a little bit less out of one's control sometimes when you're in school and you're working and trying to juggle all of these things, and some things are not all yours to control. So I think as opposed to just, staying in shape, that's one reason to do it, but another is how it feels to breathe. I think if we keep ourselves active, that breathing feels different, and we can use our breathing to help us, calm and be present.
And I think like the health and wellness center here at UNL, I think it's really great that they offer like a free gym and free just wellness tips to everybody. And I think during for my undergraduate years, I think being physically active has helped a lot mentally, especially right now. I try to incorporate working out every day, and at least getting, some time to run or to, just really put my headphones in, not really listening to anybody else and just zone in. And I think it helps mentally. And I think for musicians, it's really great. I think I was talking with another student who was saying how sometimes they just jam out in their car and they just crank up music before like a recital or something, and it just helps them kind of focus and kind of just relieve stress.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing that they let us like use a gym for free, because like you said, I think during your undergraduate years, like especially as a musician and being as busy as we are, it helps out a lot.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so as a tenured professor, how do you keep up with everything going on at the school, as well as being the director of bands? Because I'm sure you have many other jobs that you do here, apart from just conducting and stuff like that, like more behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lot of juggling. I love the analogy of juggling. And I mentioned with, the scheduling, I kind of like the challenge of how to make it all work. There is part of it I admit I like. I'm a big fan of buffers, so doing things ahead of time or with enough time so that you can feel like, okay, I'm not waiting till the last minute. It's done a day ahead of time, or maybe even farther.
So you wouldn't consider yourself a procrastinator?
No.
Okay.
In fact, there's a word called precrastinator, which there's an author named Adam Grant who's written a kind of a New York Times article about precrastination. I'm probably more on that side of things. People will say that there's a negative side. Like researchers will show that procrastinators, they've found that there are some creativity benefits that people have found. So I sort of think that probably, I'm sure that's true, but there are certain things that just need to be kind of done. And I think those that aren't creative, that if you procrastinate them, you get them kind of out of the way. You don't have to worry about, like I tell music education students, some those logistics you make for reserving buses and doing kind of things like that are great to do.
Yeah.
The things that really matter, like that can really make a lot of people, or inconvenience a lot of people, I guess. Get them done early so you don't have to worry about it, and you have more mind space for studying music. So I think creating that space to be a musician is super important. And I do that. I always prioritize the preparation for rehearsals and for teaching, always thinking about what music we're going to play way in advance, so everybody has their music in advance, and so I'm prepared, and so things go smoothly. And that's kind of how I think of things. And then also prioritizing the time to score study, which is a preparation for the music, and making sure I do that for every rehearsal, because that's what's going to keep me excited and excited to go to rehearsal. Yeah. It's funny, you think that with all the years of experience that maybe you would need to do less of that, or and a little bit that's true. Somebody can get up and do a rehearsal if they're not prepared, but it doesn't feel good. It helps, I think, people remain excited and invigorated.
Yeah. There's always something to learn from every piece, especially with like more moderate pieces. Like there's always something new. And I like when we incorporate more classic, but mix some moderate music in there too, because there's obviously a lot of things that we don't know from past times, and there's times that like from right now that we also don't know. But I think it's very important. And You do mention like a bunch of authors' names,
Mhm.
and so do you read a lot? Like, how do you read daily, or is that kind of something you
Yeah.
put in your schedule?
I do read daily. I read a little bit daily, so
Okay.
it's not very much.
Hmm.
So I read before bed,
Okay.
and I read with my daughter Violet. That's just kind of the routine we have at the moment. Kind of those bedtime routines will change, but that's the one we've had for a while, where she and I will read for maybe 15 minutes,
Hmm.
where we each read our own thing.
Mhm.
And I started keeping a spreadsheet last year
Okay.
of all the books, because if I read something on a Kindle, I'll tend to forget what the title is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I started keeping a spreadsheet. So I read 44 books last year.
Wow.
And it was mostly nonfiction, but I really love fiction too. It wasn't intentional to read mostly nonfiction. I just sort of read what sounds interesting. So that spreadsheet's allowed me to keep track a little bit more about and remember
Yeah.
what I'm reading. And,
Yeah. And
yeah, I love to read.
is that like a goal that you kind of give yourself every night, or is that something that you can, kind of just live without doing for one night? If you get like too busy and then you just get in bed and you're like, I don't feel like reading.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's something that I think that I don't feel the need to do it every day. It's more or less it feels good to do it. It's a good getting away from the screens, and it might be only 5 minutes or something that I'll read a couple pages.
Yeah, and it sounds like so from things that I've asked, when you don't get to do a certain thing in one of those days, especially being as somebody who like plans a lot and likes to keep a routine, you kind of have like a positive outlook to many of the things. So if you don't get to run, it's okay. If you don't get to read, it's okay. That's one of the things with like emotional wellness is that it depends on how well you treat things. So you have more of a positive outlook than a negative one when things don't go your way. And so that's one of the good self-growth aspects of it, is that you're able to kind of, this happened, but that's okay. And so I've noticed that a lot with a lot of the things that you've mentioned, that even though it doesn't go your way, it's okay. Because I know me, for in specific, when I schedule stuff and I have this big plan and it doesn't go my way, sometimes I might have a negative reaction to it rather than a positive one. And it's obviously something I keep working on.
Yeah.
But
well, I think that sometimes the inward reaction, not everybody sees the inward reaction. So I mean, I certainly am not always positive in when something doesn't go the way I expect it to. But I think sometimes, especially if you feel upset or a little angry about something, I think that it's really great to work through that. I think that's maybe part of emotional wellness too, is what do you do with that disappointment and anger? And is it something that you act on to kind of work through it? If it's a conflict, do you go and work it out with somebody, or if it's just kind of a performance thing that didn't go well, is it then just going and looking and, okay, what could I do better? And then especially when you're leading people, I think that it helps when people know that it's okay if something happens, we get through it, we learn from it. And having that attitude is really important, I think.
Yeah. I think it's really important, because if you don't show the ensemble that you're stressed, then they won't really stress. And so you have to kind of have a better kind of look on yourself, even if you fake it, kind of fake it until you make it kind of reaction.
And another way I think about it is I use this phrase sometimes. I don't know if I have said it out loud in rehearsal, I think, be calm. So I think especially if there's a stressful, if we talk about a piece of music where it's really stressful, it's really intricate, cultivating calm, being calm, so that everybody feels as confident as they can be, and kind of helping people keep their stress levels down is really, really important. Because if somebody is the other way and they're really, really stressed, we all pass these things to each other, as we communicate.
Yeah, and speaking of performances, kind of how do you prepare before a performance?
Oh, great question.
Like, is there kind of like a routine that you have, or is there kind of like I give myself 5 minutes alone, not really talking to anybody kind of thing? Or like what's something that you do?
Yeah. Well, I think a day or two before I'm going through all the music, and sometimes there's something tricky. Like for instance, if we're doing a piece with a lot of mixed meter, and there's something that maybe I've made a mistake with something I want to make sure that really want to make sure that the trouble spots that are in my brain are really solidified, and I've kind of prepared myself for anything that I think is just tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And then thinking about, the whole thing as a whole, how's it going to work? What's it going to feel like? We talk about visioning and envisioning what you want. I really think that envisioning the environment, the excitement level, the how it feels, I do think about that and how we want that to play out. Yeah, and in terms of routine, I know some people have time alone. I think it's hard when it's a weekday and family, pick up my kids from school and everybody has to eat. And my husband before COVID is usually traveling, a lot. So it's sometimes, getting a babysitter, getting them situated. So sometimes those things are really not performance. They're kind of contrary to that mindset of performance. So being able to quickly switch, and then also make sure that I have a little time right before, coming to school and going to my office and making sure I feel together. And
and that's good to get advice for some people, because some people might have, not everybody's the same, and so not everybody's perfect either. And so a lot of people always just have different methods that they use to kind of prepare for to either play or to conduct. And so I know a lot of undergraduate students here might find that beneficial to kind of know that even that there's a life outside of a professor. For example, I think just now or before coming here, there was a student who said, "I forgot that professors have a life outside of school." It's so weird to think that oh yeah, you do have kids, you do have a family, you do other things, and that's another thing, that it's being able to socialize with the students and kind of bond, that I think many of the professors here at UNO do a really well job. And so you're able to kind of just meet the professor and kind of get to know them. And I think it creates a great bond between students and professors, especially in an ensemble setting. You want to be comfortable with one another to the point where this professor said to do this, all right, I'm going to do it. And how do you kind of create that environment, especially for a first year teacher at a completely different school? How do you create a environment that you think or that students will really want to come and approach you?
So you're thinking about for an undergraduate student going into a program, being a first year teacher, what things should they do? Well, establishing a great connection with students and trust is really important, and that has to be initiated by the teacher. And so depending, there's always an environment that people go into, and you don't know what kind of environment that will be. Is it an environment where they've had a teacher where there wasn't a connection, they didn't feel cared about? So then sometimes it's an easier transition for someone, because they come in, they do those things, and people are really glad. But sometimes somebody's replacing a teacher that's really beloved and has been there forever, and people are resistant. So it's the same. I think that trust that somebody brings. I think great music, that the curriculum, the great music is really helpful. I know when I was a first year teacher, making that connection was really tricky. And that was where I felt really ill-equipped in my first year teaching, because it was our education didn't go into that, how to really do that. So I remember where those connections were found. They were found in unexpected places. They were found doing Smells Like Teen Spirit with the pep band and just try like that mutual, this is fun. Yeah. And then because they love that. And so by us having that kind of unified enjoyment of something, that helped build the trust. Preparation is important in terms of using people's time. You know, like you mentioned the schedule. I think it's really important to use people's time really well. You know, people want to know how their time's going to be spent. And when it varies from what's said, then that's frustrating for everybody. None of us like that. And I think for people teaching high school, younger students, maybe they're not as perceptive, but I think it matters. There's so many things to think about, but building that professional connection and having making sure students know that you care about them, and that you just be a model to enjoy music. It sounds sort of silly to all of us because we wouldn't be musicians if we didn't love it, but sometimes that ability to communicate that love for music when you're a young teacher, because you're worried about people, the discipline and people doing what they should do and all of those things get in the way. And sometimes that can make it, unpleasant, and if somebody's dealing with those kinds of things. But that love for music, I think, is important to build that connection. Yeah. And I do remember a story that I think might have heard from you maybe 2-3 years ago, was when you first landed one of your, it's either after your master's or one of your teaching positions, as to being either the director of bands or like the assistant director of bands, and how you had so much confidence into, I want to be the director of bands for this school. And you had gone into this interview. How did you have so much confidence in that time? Because was that after your bachelor's, or that was after my master's?
After your master's, okay.
Which is kind of partly explains the timing.
Yeah.
At that point, I had some flexibility of where to look for a job. My husband and I were happy to look a lot of different places. We weren't tied to a geographical area. So when I was offered that job, which they were looking for they had two positions to hire, a director of bands and assistant director of bands, and they called me to tell me that they knew they wanted to offer me one of the jobs. And so they were hoping I would just accept that I would come regardless. But I had said, no, I'm only interested in the director of bands job. I will wait, because they had more people to interview. And so what I learned afterward was that was how they knew that I was the right person for the director of bands job, was because I said what I wanted. But I think that people's circumstances, especially when you're taking that first job, that's maybe not, it depends on your circumstances if that is a good move or not.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously with that confidence and just wanting to be like that director of bands, I mean, and landing your job. But no, yeah, I really love that story, because I mean, to me, it just tells me that like, this is one thing that I wanted, this is what I want to go for, and I'm going for it. And so to me, I really just enjoy that story. Yeah. So for a lot of undergraduate students, I think they'd like to know what's one piece of advice that you would want to give for undergraduate students, like during their 4 or 5 years during their career or during their undergraduate degree.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things, in terms of, so all undergraduate music majors.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be music education, since you were a music education major. What's something that maybe during your undergraduate years you wish you could tell yourself now?
That's a great question. it's interesting to be a faculty member teaching undergraduates and then, of course, put yourself back at that time. And, and thinking about wellness, I think certainly, I remember one instance of being at a recital that should have been an enjoyable experience to watch this. I think it was a guest artist, something that was pretty, cool to see. But because of all of the things I had to do, I remember feeling very anxious, and I really didn't want to be there because I wanted to go and get the things done.
Yeah.
And I just remember that instance of feeling like I couldn't change how I felt, And so I think having some tools to help people moderate and maybe feel more even. I'm kind of a big fan of, we talk about routines and evenness. We think about music making is not even, you want these big change, but to be set up to feel good, I think feeling even is really important. So that can be a lot of different things for a lot of people, a lot of people like yoga. I do not like yoga.
Really?
Right?
Really?
Never have been able to, but people will rave about it and get a lot out of it. So one thing that would have helped me would have been to be more physically active. I think at that time it would have given me the tool to use, which I didn't have. My tool was I need to go work harder.
Yeah.
And get my things done.
And I think a lot of students do forget the whole wellness aspect, and that coming into college, you should also care for yourself. I remember for me coming in, I was like, this is music school. These are all the things I have to do. I don't have time for anything else, and so I wouldn't really put my wellness or my health into consideration until like way afterwards. For example, like now this senior year, last semester, especially with COVID, it was very hard to kind of, go out to places or really feel comfortable being in a public space. So such as a gym, such as school, just anywhere. And I think it really affected my mental health in last semester. And I had a good friend of mine that told me once that, like, they said, hey, I realize that you are more like self-aware and you're more positive when you work out than when you don't. And to me, it took me a while to kind of realize that because I was such in a bad mental state. And to me, it kind of opened my eyes, and I was like, you're right. Like I should definitely take care of myself. There should be more time to really put into myself as much as I'm putting into all my work at school.
Yeah.
And so like this semester, I started working out a bit more, and I realized that every day I want to go back. And as hard as, maybe the workout might be, I'd rather be there and give myself that hour time to really help myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really good thing to take into consideration during your undergrad year, because there's a lot to do as a musician, especially during sophomore continuations, juries, and everything. I think it's something to take into consideration.
And doing some of those things early in the day too is good, because then you've done it. You prioritize and I can approach the day.
Yeah, and as much as I don't I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
So I have to wake up at 7:30 in the morning to go work out at 8 before all my classes. Just because to me, I do feel more accomplished. I feel like, all right, I got that out of the way. Now I can go to my music theory class, go to my wind ensemble, work, everything that my day consists of. But I think it benefits me, and I think a lot of people like to work out more in the mornings than in the afternoons.
And I think it's good problem solving time. I don't listen to anything when I work when I run. I just and sometimes I get tired of myself, right? But I think there are certain sticky problems that will just work itself out on, and I really like that about it.
I mean, for me, I think I might be a bit different. I problem solve, but I will just put on my headphones and noise cancellation, not talk to anybody else, and kind of just crank the music all the way up. And that's how I'm thinking of all right, today I have to do this, and you know, kind of scheduling myself for the next day or that day. And I think I'm doing more of a day-to-day basis for planning and scheduling. I don't know if you go like by weeks or day by days.
Great.
Yeah. Is that what you do? Do you go by weeks or by days?
I have different levels.
Okay.
Yeah, so for SWE, I plan for the semester. And so in a typical year, I would do that in the summer. I would write down every rehearsal, even for the spring semester.
Yeah.
I do this Word document.
Wow.
And kind of figure out where the performances are, if there's anything that's going to interrupt us, if some students are gone on a trip or something. And so it's kind of big picture planning. And then, you know, the other things are a little bit less tangible. You know, I keep a list, and the list has no format. You wouldn't be able to decipher really, but I'll have longer term things on there and like immediate things. And I can mix that up, and it works fine for me. Yeah, and then the daily things too. I think the daily is probably I would imagine that's what most people do.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, I used to be more of a weekly person, and then I realized that I can't really do that. I can't really keep up with that because things just fluctuate and change every day.
Yeah.
And so now it's more of a day by day, and like I at least know what I'll do tomorrow. But during my time when I'm working out or stuff, that's when I usually do all of that planning.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't really like talk to anyone, or I just like I can look at my phone, but I can't really talk to anybody else.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I give myself that time.
That's a great way to spend the time too, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as long as that gets done in the morning, I think it's great for me and it works. So I think everybody could benefit from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but yeah, it's been a pleasure having you here on the podcast today, and you have given so much great information, and it's been great learning from you for the past 4 years as well.
Well, thank
So,
you.
Yeah, thank you for
having
coming.
me.
Yeah,
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.